This is the President McCormack Podcast with your host, Mark McCormack.
Ladies and gentlemen, on the podcast today, my good friend, Dani Howard.
Hi, I'm happy to be here.
This is fun. I actually invited you yesterday, right?
Yeah, it was super last minute, but I was like, yeah, that feels good. Let's do it.
I know we're coordinating some other stuff that we're doing, and then I was just like, I had this slot open. I hadn't really filled it, but I also was like so busy this week, I didn't even think about it. And as I'm texting you, I'm kind of going back and forth in this little like note that I use on my phone. Mm-hmm. I'm like, oh, Dani, dude, come on my podcast. You're like, I'm in. I'm like, perfect.
Perfect. I'm excited.
Awesome. So you are an Idaho girl.
I am.
Explain what that means to people.
I know a lot of people think that Idaho and Utah are the same thing, but it's very different up there, especially if you get into northern Idaho. But I grew up in southern Idaho in a little town called Malad.
Yeah.
And most people in Utah know it because that's where they stop and get their lottery tickets. Right. But my family's ranch is about 8 miles over the border. So we did watch the Utah news growing up because it was actually Salt Lake was closer to us than Idaho Falls, which is the next closest news channel. So I do always feel like I kind of like grew up with a Utah influence, but still an Idaho girl.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So on your family's ranch, like what do they have on there?
Yeah, so I grew up we had dairy cattle and we had beef cattle. So having a dairy it's exhausting because you're milking twice a day, every day, 365 days a week. So it's really hard to leave because then you have to ask someone to cover all of that for you. So we didn't get to travel when I was little. One time a year we would go to Lagoon before school would start, and it was like we had to milk early in the morning. We'd run down to Lagoon, and it was like a rat race. It was like, we got to get to the Colossus. We got to get here so that we could leave by 4 in order to get home and like start milking again. Nice. So that was like my upbringing. Then when I was around 22, we got out of the dairy. And so now we just have beef cows, and we have about 1,000 acres of land that we run. But farms are a lot of work.
So how'd you get out of the dairy cows? Did you sell them off, or did you?
Yeah, so we actually took the milk over to Gosner's in Logan, and all the dairies in Malad slowly one by one went out because it's kind of a dying thing. You have the huge dairies that have 4,000 plus cows, and it's just a machine. But the small family farms really are kind of dying, which is sad. So there's only 2 of us left in the valley. And so they said it's not worth it for us to come all the way over to Malad to get your milk anymore. So it's kind of, we didn't have a choice, but it was a blessing in disguise because like I said, it's so much work. Yeah. And so it is a lot easier to maintain now when you're just running the property and running a beef herd, because they just kind of have to go out to pasture and, you got to doctor them a couple times a year. But it is, like I said, it is unfortunate that we're kind of pushing out the small family farmer because you would want your food to come from that versus the factory farms. It's like, I didn't realize how lucky I was growing up eating homegrown beef and vegetables and potatoes and drinking well water every day. And now I come to the city and I'm like, oh my gosh, my water has all sorts of chemicals in it. I've got to filter it. I don't get any natural minerals anymore. I don't know where my food came from. I don't know if it was sustainably raised. And so it's something that I'm trying to figure out how to tap back into from the city. And it takes a lot of work, to like get your minerals back and to know where your meat came from and to know how it was raised. And so I'm hoping one day that I can maybe figure out a way to market like my family's ranch to all of my friends down here. And it can be like, hey, this was, where your meat was raised. And this is, it was sustainably brought up and ethically sourced, and so yeah, we'll see.
No, that's way cool. Yeah. So my buddy owns the Royal Dairy up in Royal, Washington. Have you heard of that?
Okay, cool.
It's huge, like huge.
Yeah.
So he, we met in Las Vegas. We do some business together, and we're kind of doing some things. And I was talking to him, and then he's like, "Oh, you gotta come up and see my dairy, right?" And I was like, oh, "Okay, cool." So I showed him this thing, and I'm like, "What the hell?" Like, he does like well over $100 million a year revenue, right? Like
those huge dairies. I'm looking at this thing,
crazy. It's like, and I look at it, and I'm like, and they have like cherry orchards and apple orchards, and like it's the Royal Family Farming is like the big brand over top of the whole thing. And I think he's either combined 3 or 4 dairies to get where he's at. And I'm like novice as hell, right?
Yeah.
So we go in like the milking chambers or whatever you call them, right? And I mean, there's, I don't know, 70 people in there working or something crazy, right? And there's just like row after row after row. And I was like, so when do you guys ever shut this down? And they're like, never. Like it never shuts down. There's always the next cows coming in.
Yep.
I think they have about 30 births a day, right? That happen right outside that area. And those big tanker trucks, one leaves every 45 minutes full of milk.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is insane.
Yeah.
You know? He's driving me around and I'm like, we kind of went up on the top of this hill, you know, kind of overlook the valley. And he's like, yeah, pretty much that whole area there and that whole area there. And I'm like, this is really cool. And he's really into regenerative farming. And so he's actually paid for, what would you call it, a software system, I guess, that he's created, right? And so if you go to, so a lot of the high-end restaurants in Seattle and in Portland and stuff, they take his beef and they can actually, there's tags on the beef that like say where it was from, how long it lived for, like all this kind of cool stuff. I guess,
and that's like what I want to figure out, how to capitalize that with the small family farms, because they've run things the same way for forever. And I'm trying to get them away from the belief of like, well, this is how we've always done things. And like, I get that, but it's not sustainable. You have to do things differently now. So I'm trying to like go out in the world, get all this business knowledge, and then figure out how I can capitalize that with the small family farm.
I gotta hook you guys up then.
What?
I gotta hook you two guys up.
Yeah, I would love that. And we just started Wagyu beef this year, actually. So we've only been Angus this whole time, but we are transitioning to Wagyu.
Are you doing a mix or is it straight?
So Wagyu beef, like the bull has to be registered and it's like a whole process in order for it to be like true Wagyu beef. But when you breed, it has to be with like partially Angus cows. Like you don't want fully Wagyu, but you don't want fully Angus. So there's like, yeah, it's been interesting, like getting into it this year. But
so I literally I have a whole fridge of it because he does the same thing and I bought it from him. So I bought a full cow. So the freaking meat we eat is so good at my house.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the difficult thing is the meat packing. Like we could do that if we could figure out how to, package it better, because that's the difficult part, is like finding somebody that's going to cut up the meat and do that for you.
Now this is weird because I'm involved in businesses, but like this one's random. So I invested in a meatpacking plant in Idaho Falls.
Oh, okay.
That's just got up and running in like December, I think.
Oh.
And so it's pretty close to you, right?
Yeah. So we'll have to like make some connections. We'll see.
Yeah. They need more cows in there.
All right.
So yeah, it's funny. So I actually, you know Jeremy Nevis, right?
Yeah.
So Jeremy,
I'm really close with Taryn.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So Jeremy was like, hey, do you want to invest in this thing? I was like, what is it? You know, and he was like, it's a meatpacking plant. I was like, well, give me the details. So he sends it to me, right? And I like it because I get how it works. It's just a manufacturing plant, basically, right? And so I called my buddy Austin, who owns the Royal Dairy, right? And he's like, oh yeah, dude, like this is a no-brainer. Like, and half the equity in the place is owned by the farmers that, or the ranchers that bring their own cows in, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. They're just going to feed it with their own bulls, you know, and all this kind of thing. And so.
All right. We'll have to chat offline.
Yeah,
Maybe this is honestly, exactly what I've been needing. It's crazy sometimes how the universe is like, when you put it out there to them, then it's like the universe will make things happen. Yeah. I like totally believe that's kind of how manifestation works too. It's like you throw it out there and the universe is like, oh, okay, well, yeah, I can make this happen for you. Versus if you like don't ever speak it or you don't ever like indicate what you want, then it's like if you don't know what you want, then the universe doesn't know how to like help you get what you want. So like getting really clear on that.
Yeah, it's cool. So are you drawn to the ranch?
So I am so grateful I grew up that way, because when you're in the middle of it and you're like in high school cheer, but you have to go out and like feed baby calves and buck hay and do all that stuff before you go to high school cheer, I was like, this isn't fair, you know? And my grandpa would always say, you're going to be so grateful you grew up this way, kid. Yeah. And I am. I got to grow up so close to my family, working day in and day out. And it's kind of like this camaraderie where it's like, you're all in it to keep the ranch going from year to year. And you're outside and you're connecting with nature. And it's just like, you learn the value of hard work. And so now everything I do in my life seems so easy compared to that. Like this last week, my family was out of town. And so I went and I was doing, you know, the farm work, like before work and after work, and doing my corporate job in the middle of it and stuff. And I just think, you know, there's days my corporate job is hard, but I'm like, it's never as hard as when you're trying to like pull a calf and keep the cow alive, and like just things like that where, and like my corporate job isn't depending on the weather, you know, like last year was a really rough year for a lot of farmers, because when you have a drought, like we were worried whether we were going to make it through the winter with enough hay, because everybody's that way. So you can't buy it anywhere because everybody's having to hold on to their hay to just try to and it was the first year that when I'd be out there in the winter, they'd say, you can't feed that much, and so it's really difficult to think about that. Then this year we have so much hay that I'm like, how are we ever going to get it off of the fields before second crop is growing? So it's just so interesting. You're like very dependent on the weather.
How long can you keep hay for?
Quite a while. Yeah.
Like
I mean,
years,
it'll
right?
start, especially if it's like covered, you can keep it for quite a while. If it's out in the elements, then it's going to start to mold eventually. Yeah. But it's like, there's so much to it. Like you cut, it has to dry for a certain amount of days. If you bale it too dry, then it just kind of like loses its nutritional value. If you bale it too wet, it actually can catch on fire.
Oh, really?
It like will combust inside. It gets hot, and that's when haystacks go down, and it's like devastating when that happens. So it's a fine balance. So most of the time you're baling in the middle of the night, and it's when the dew is a certain level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's wild.
There's so much to it. It's crazy. And you have to rotate fields, because if you have alfalfa in there for too long, the soil becomes like oversaturated. So you got to tear it up, put grain in there, versus if you have grain in there for too long, it'll become too dry and nutrient deficient. So you have to switch it around. There's so much that goes into it.
I watched a movie that basically went to the future, right? And it was like we had stripped all the nutrients out of all the dirt throughout the Midwest, basically. Was it? I don't know if it was Interstellar. I can't remember.
I don't know.
Anyways, whatever movie it was, I don't think it was Interstellar, but it turned to dust.
Yeah.
Right? And it was like this massive problem. And then I was watching YouTube over the last couple of years, and there's been some experts talking about that.
Yeah.
And I'm always like,
yeah, our soil is less nutritious than it ever has been. So even when you are eating good food that was grown on the earth, it's not got the same nutritional value that it did before.
Yeah. What's the way to fix that? Like manure, right?
Yeah, I mean, and we have to, my grandpa would call it, he was spreading sunshine.
Yeah.
So, and you'd be like, oh, it smells so bad. But yeah, you've got to spread the manure, which is all part of the regenerative stuff. It's something that I really missed living in the city and living in Salt Lake. And so I actually started a garden this year, and I'm starting to compost, and it's been really fun to be like, okay, my food scraps are going to go to my compost, and my compost is going to turn into soil, which I'm going to put into my garden, and getting back into the basics, I guess, a little bit.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. I agree with you. I think everybody should be on a farm a little bit.
Yeah.
I never did. Right. I worked in the back of my dad's manufacturing plant. It was different, but kind of the same.
But you grew up having to work hard, and
ever since I was 8. You know? Yeah, we had a job, we had $2 an hour or whatever, and that was, you're lucky to have that kind of thing.
Yeah, I know.
What the hell?
I know. I giggle at what I got for working for the entire summer. It's comical now, but
yeah. No, that's amazing. What else did you like about the ranch? Do you have other animals up there, or is it just cows pretty much?
Yeah, it's mainly just cows. I mean, I had bunnies and I had dogs and cats. You've got to have farm cats if you're going to live up there. Otherwise, you're overrun by mice. And so it's we always had baby kitties. Yeah. We always I don't know. I guess I do have a connection with animals. And so that was always fun to me, is that I have my little baby calves that would follow me around and stuff.
You do horses?
Yeah, I had horses too.
Horses, yeah.
Yep.
My kids, it's their dream to go up there and do that stuff.
Yeah. So. I know it's been hard because that's such a piece of me that I love, and I miss having horses. Actually, when I was in college at Utah State, I took my horses with me.
Oh,
so
really?
I would take care of my horses morning and night, clean out their stalls, ride them and everything in between working pretty much full time and going to school. But it was just, they were so important to me. And then I hit a point where I recognized, okay, I'm either going to have to go full in on this rodeo thing, or I'm almost going to have to just sell my horses and get out of it altogether. Because I did have this whole other aspect of my life that I wanted to experience with traveling and with being able to go and do things. And it was kind of I had to do one or the other. I couldn't do both. Because it was I was making good money, but not enough to be able to go book an international flight and then shoe my horses every 6 weeks. It was I wish I got new shoes every 6 weeks, but my horses were prioritized, and it's $110 every time the horse farrier comes. And so I'm dropping $220 every 6 weeks just to shoe them, not alone their vet bills and their hay and everything.
Are they expensive to feed?
Yeah, they're pretty expensive to feed. Horses are very they're kind of weak animals. You don't think that they're Like you see a horse, you just think it's this really strong thing. They step on a rock wrong and they'll get an abscess in their foot and they're lame. And you're like taking them to the vet. And you're like, you should be stronger than this. I don't know.
Yeah, like what the hell?
But
I'll tell you one thing that it gets me every time it comes on TikTok is shoeing a horse. Watching a guy shoe a horse.
It's an art.
And then the stupid cow ones too, right? Where the cows have like a rock.
An abscess and they like to.
Yeah, they're like putting this goo on it and shaving it down and, using that thing to like.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm always just like, I don't
I'd
know
be
why
like
I'm so into
soaking
that.
my horse's foot in betadine and Epsom salt and like making a horse stand in a bucket for, 20 minutes or whatever. And then I'm wrapping a diaper around it in order to keep it clean. And it's just like, it's funny the things that you do to like baby them. Yeah.
No, dude, horses are really cool. When I went up to the Royal Dairy to see my buddy, right? He's like, do you want to ride horses? And I was like, yeah, let's freaking do it. I'm like, I don't feel tall now. I might as well get on a horse, right? And it was so much fun because I FaceTime my kids. And I'm like, hey, guess what Dad's doing? They're like, what? And I'm just like going like this, and I'm on a horse, and they're just going crazy. Like, you're on a horse. I'm like, yeah, it's fun. I'm up here with my buddy.
They're so funny too because they're such intuitive animals that they know who they can mess with. And that's why I feel like everybody I talked to, they like had a horrible experience with a horse. And it's
really?
it's because they know that they can like run off with you because they know that you're like afraid of them.
Yeah.
Whereas they know when you're like, no, I'm the boss and you're going to listen to me.
No, I'll tell you like a funny moment I had, right?
Yeah.
So I knew that about horses, right? So I grew up in Highland Alpine, right? Highland Alpine area.
And it was more rural back then.
Oh, big time.
Yeah.
Yeah. We had like, I don't think we had any direct neighbors that touched our property that had horses, but we definitely had neighbors in the ward that had horses, right? And so the first time I rode one, I was probably 12, right? And we actually we did it for like a ward activity where we're like giving like invitations out to people to come to the ward party. We were like the three wise men or something, right? And so when I go up there and he's like, you want to ride horses? I was like, sure. And I go, as soon as we get out of the car or the truck, right, I go, which one's mine? And he goes, that one. Right. He goes, she's old, don't worry, blah, blah. She'll carry around, right? So I go walking right over that thing. I just start petting it. Right. And I can't really touch a lot of animals because I'm allergic to like dogs and stuff. And I'm just sitting there and I'm like, please just be gentle with me today. And I'm literally just like whispering into this horse, like, hey, I'm not really scared, but I'm not really like comfortable. And I'm literally talking to this horse like the whole damn time they're like saddling it up. And I remember the guys kind of looking at me, because I'm just like really like, oh, I didn't know he's into horses. And I'm just like, please God, do not buck me.
Don't kill me.
This will hurt me so bad if I come off you, And I'm just like, and when I got on her, it was just like, we were just chilling the whole time. I was like, oh, thank you. Because they really can. They can feel you. Like if you're scared shitless on that thing, they're nervous and.
Yeah. No, not to be corny, but to bring up the show Yellowstone. But there is a scene that I absolutely love in that show where he's like trying to get one of the characters to ride this horse. And she's just like, keeps getting bucked off. And he's like, a horse can feel a fly land on its back. So whatever you're bringing to the table, it can feel that through you. So like you have to like understand like the energy that you're bringing, and then it's like then they become connected. And and it's so true though that I think a lot of animals are very energetically intuitive with what you have going on, and it is kind of incredible when you can tap into that.
I remember that scene. I know exactly what you're talking about. Was it a little punk kid kind of that was getting on it?
I think so. Yeah, I don't know. It's been a while, but
it's funny when you're saying that too, like just to take it into the sci-fi world, right? It's kind of like Avatar.
Yeah.
Right. Remember when they get in those big like dragon looking things and then like kind of connect, and then finally like connects with them, their energy matches, and then they can go all over the place. It's like, it's true.
Yeah.
That's how these animals work.
That's super cool.
So what made you leave the ranch and come down to the big city?
Yeah. So I did go to Utah State for my undergrad, and I was living in, which Logan was a good like step up for me because I didn't even have a stoplight in my town growing up. It was like, I wasn't really exposed to any culture or anybody different than me. And so I got to Logan and Utah State and I got more comfortable. And then after I graduated, I ended up moving down to Salt Lake and working at IMED for a few years. And I do love it down here though. I love Utah. I love the outdoors. I love the people. There's obviously some nuances of the state. But I think as soon as I started experiencing the world a little bit, it was like, I can't get enough of it. And it's because I didn't get to go anywhere growing up. I didn't really get to be around anybody that was different than me. Like everybody kind of had the same belief system and stuff. And then I started traveling a little bit and I started kind of like seeing these other cultures and seeing what other people believed in. And it was like, I just want to experience all of it now. My family's like, they don't ever want to leave the country. They're like, why would you ever want to leave this country? And so at first it really stressed them out. I got stuck in Italy my first time abroad during like some airline strikes and stuff, and they were totally flipped out. And now it's like to the point when we went to the Middle East a couple of years ago, we didn't think we were going to get out of Jordan because they didn't like the COVID tests we had taken, because that was like right when you could start traveling again, but it wasn't super accessible and it was really difficult. And so we go to get on our flights in Jordan in order to come back home. And this, mind you, this is like the same exact time the U.S. is pulled out of Afghanistan. People are falling from airplanes and it's a complete mess. And we're in the Middle East. Yeah. It was unnerving, to say the least. And one of those times that it's like, have we pushed too far? Are we like being irresponsible by being here? Yeah. But they told us that our COVID tests weren't good. And so we needed to take their COVID tests. And it was this moment of panic that it's like, what if one of us tests positive? And they quarantine all of us for the next 2 weeks. Yeah. And we're stuck in this country. And I'm like calling my mom, letting her know I'm not sure if we're going to make it back to Egypt, which is where we'd come from. And we were like, that was where our flight back to the US was coming from. And fortunately, like, by the skin of our teeth, we all got our results back in time to like run to our gate and get on the plane and then start the process back to Egypt and back home. But yeah, I don't even know where I was going with that story, but I think it's just once I started getting a taste of just how different the world is, that now I just want to experience it all. And every single time I go abroad, it makes me so grateful when I get to come home to the US. Like, so grateful.
Yeah, I felt the same way. There's a lot of times like that. I actually, Michelle and I would love to live in like the state, just to live life a little bit, right? Yeah. And during COVID, I was so grateful I lived in Utah. It was insane. I was going to, and I could, the response was different for everybody. People were scared, and obviously more liberal states or whatever, right? Were more hardcore with their rules or whatever, right? But I remember being in Los Angeles like pretty soon after it happened, and I had passes to go everywhere because we have we have contracts with general contractors on federal government jobs, so we just got to
so you're essential.
Yeah, you're good. Yeah, essential. Yeah, wink. And I remember being in LA and it was like a ghost town, and I am like, this is so freaking weird. It's like 5 o'clock. I'm just driving 85 miles an hour down a freeway, and there's cars, but there's like no one, Yeah. And it was eerie. We came back here to Utah, and I just remember it's a little more relaxed and people are a little less uptight. People are still a little worried, but like it was just like, okay, I get it. I'm kind of back with my people, right? We're like, we're not dumb, but we're not going to go crazy, Yeah,
well, and the infrastructure is just better set up here. Like the healthcare system is better set up. We don't live on top of each other like you do in big cities. We don't rely on mass like transportation. And so obviously our response was very different than it would be in New York. Yeah. Like it just was a completely like apples and oranges like situation. But I'm with you. I was so appreciative that I was living in Utah at that period of time. Oh yeah. And that we had the freedom to go outside and get in the mountains, and that they are, right in our backyard, and we could go do those things instead of like being stuck in a 1-bedroom apartment in the middle of the city. Can you even imagine? No. That would have been awful.
No, I don't know what I would have done. Probably I would have drugged myself to do it, probably.
Well, yeah, it's just sad to think of like where people's mental health went in that space, like the addictions that came from it. Whereas a lot of people in the West, they were like, I'm actually more active and healthy than I've ever been, you know?
Right. Yeah. A lot of boats were sold. A lot of ATVs were sold. Yeah. There was a lot of getting outdoors. It was cool.
Yeah. I turned into like a hippie rock climber. I was like, well, I can't travel, so I'm just going to go rock climb. It was great.
Well, that's fun. Yeah. That's fun. Now you live in Salt Lake by yourself, right? Or do you have roommates?
I have one friend that lives with me, but we never see each other. We're both always like traveling. So it is funny when we do see each other, we're like, hey, how are you? Yeah.
Have I met her? Do I know her?
No, it's Guy, actually. Oh, okay. I have a guy friend that lives with me.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, nice. We play volleyball together, so.
Yeah, because you guys do a lot of volleyball, right?
Yeah, I have a volleyball court, a sand volleyball court in my backyard. That is not a normal thing in Utah, but a few years ago, it was like I had the space. I'm in an old corner lot in Sandy, so I had just this huge chunk of grass, and it was like, why am I watering and mowing this every single week? Like, this is such a waste. Yeah. So I had some friends throw out the idea of like, we should build a sand volleyball court in your backyard. And we did it. And it was a lot more work than I ever thought that it was going to be. Oh my gosh, it was so much work. I brought in 120 tons of sand.
Why?
Because you have to dig down that far.
How deep is it?
It's like 18 to 20 inches in the deepest section.
Dang, it took that much sand, huh?
Yeah.
Wow.
But if you think of like a full-size volleyball court, and then you've got to have some side on the outsides.
Yeah.
So like ripping out the yard, then I had 120 tons of dirt that I was like, oh my gosh, we got to get rid of this now. And so it was just like weekend after weekend, we were putting in the work. And that was the first time I like realized that you could really just like figure this stuff out on your own and build things. And so now I build all sorts of things in my house.
I was going to say you have. What was that thing you recently did? Was it
I did my stairs. I ripped out the carpet in my stairs and then but then I realized that like one of the first set of stair treads were brand new, but the bottom set weren't. And I wasn't going to be able to like sand them down because they had like layers and layers of paint on. So I'd rip out the stair treads, replace those, stain them, replace the stair risers, all of it. But
do you love doing that, or is it just in you to do that?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think that because I grew up on the farm, we're so physically active that I find a lot of enjoyment in just like actually physically working. So when I sit in my chair all day long and I'm working for 8 to 10 hours a day on meetings, it's almost like a release for me to be able to go like do something with my hands. Yeah. And I actually was a little worried at first because I'll be like out and dating and stuff, and guys will be like, is it a turnoff to you that you're more handy than I am? And it's like, yes and no, you know, because I'm just like, I also don't expect that people who didn't grow up the same way as me would have the same knowledge. But there is a level of like really appreciating a man that's like super manly and, handy and stuff. And so I was a little worried for a while that I was like, am I tapping too much of my masculine energy by like doing all these projects and like ripping these things out? And then it finally like clicked to me one day that I'm like, no, I think that's the way I express my creativity. Yeah. Is that by like, it's almost like artistic to me where I'm deciding, oh, what am I going to paint this and how I'm going to make this look? Like when I made my fireplace in my house, it was like...
That was the one I remember seeing,
so I decided to do like a concrete finish. And so like, I think it's more artistic for me than anything. And so I actually feel very feminine when I do it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looked good. Yeah. Was that a pretty easy project, or was that?
No.
Okay.
About halfway through because, I had to build the frame out and it was the dead of winter and I don't have a garage. And so I was like building the frame in my front room. Yeah. So I was just like, okay, this is fine. But then I had to drywall it in and drywall is hard. It was really hard. But I'm just, every time I learn a skill, I'm just like, fun. Now I know how to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. So when you did the concrete finish, did you pull plaster or did you do concrete? Yeah,
so it's like a specific plaster finish where you put it on with like one of those like metal drywall scrapers and you kind of just like scrape it all different directions and then you sand it off and then you do another coat of that so it gives it this like dimensional concrete look.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, my buddy who lives down in Texas, he just built a new house. Well, he gutted a house, but it's like totally brand new. Right?
Yeah.
And so it's almost went down the sticks. And him and his wife, they pulled plaster over like the whole thing themselves. They were trying to hire it out and they just couldn't.
Yeah.
I can't remember, they couldn't find someone who had the skills to do it or they didn't trust the skills. But anyways, they ended up doing it themselves. And it's amazing. But I'm like, dude, the amount of work you put into this is like insane. I can't remember if he said he wouldn't do it again or what, but like, and he pulled a lot. It was a big house. Yeah. But it's like, but when you start looking at the plaster, I'm like, oh, this is way cool. It just has a high-end look to it.
Yeah. I don't know. I really like it. So, and I oftentimes am just listening to podcasts the whole time I'm doing it too. So I'm either listening to a podcast or I'm listening to a book and I'm like, I mean, what else would I be doing? I might as well like do something like that. And so I've actually finally started making my own YouTube videos of it.
Oh, have you? Cool.
Yeah. So I'm like, I resisted it for a long time. And then finally I was like, wait, I have to watch YouTube videos oftentimes to figure out how to do certain little things. So I'm like, why not be like a feminine person that does it? And so then women can be like, okay, well, if this girl can do it, then I can figure it out. Yeah. And then it's like empowering for them. If they're just at home all day versus like their husband coming home and being like, can you do this now? And it's like one more thing he has to do. Like how empowering for her to be able to go like, no, I'm going to like rip the carpet out from the stairs because I can do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's awesome skills. So what have you done in the house? What else have you done in there?
Well, besides the massive sand volleyball court that's in my backyard, I did that. I built my garden boxes this year. Those were actually super easy to build. And it only cost me like $50 to $100 a box versus if you look at the size that I built online, they were like $500 a box. Yeah. So those were easy to build. Last year I did like some xeriscaping in my front yard. Cool. So I like ripped out the park strip and like put a lot of rock and like some bushes and stuff in instead of like, especially it was so dry and so hot last summer that lawns are kind of a waste. So I'm like, let's figure out how to, and you don't use your front yard rarely.
Oh, I totally agree. If I was to rebuild a house, I'd put turf in. Yeah. We sell turf and I'm like, poof, turf.
Yeah. So I did that. I mean, I've done like a lot of accent walls, like this wall that's, I know the viewers aren't going to see this, but in this house, I'll do walls like this. Yeah. And I actually have an Airbnb up in my hometown in Malad, which is so random. People are like, who stays in Malad? Yeah. But it's mainly just because there's nowhere else to stay. Yeah. And so I'll get people that are coming into town for like baseball tournaments or hunting or like the horse races, or they're visiting grandma and grandma doesn't have any room for the family. So they're like, it's easier to stay in an Airbnb. But I did accent walls like this in each of the rooms.
Oh, cool. Yeah, these are pretty easy, right?
Yeah, they're just like 1x2s. And if you have a miter saw, you just like turn it to like 45-degree angle, and then you just brad nail them up and caulk and finish.
Yeah. 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 I did one with my brother one time. It was random though. It looked like sticks were falling down. So we would cut between 6. It was like we did like 106, 109, 112. And then we would just kind of like randomly put them up. So it actually came off the wall a little bit. Yeah. And it was cool because it don't know, it just looked like falling sticks. And I was like, oh, that was a lot of work and it looks cool. So good.
Yeah. I don't know. It's fun. Gives your house like some character.
So how well does your Airbnb do?
It actually, in June, it was booked 28 days.
Dang.
Yeah.
So that's a good month. Really good month.
Yeah. In the winter, it definitely slows down a bit, but I actually had some general contractors that are doing some work up there that have been booking with me off app because they stay. So they would kind of stay all week and then my weekends would be open. And, you know, I get people that are passing through on their way to Yellowstone a lot of times because Malad's almost the halfway point if you fly into Salt Lake. And so it's just right off the interstate. I have people that I take pets, which is also a unique thing. And so people will just be like driving through and they need somewhere right off the interstate that they can stay with a pet. And so they'll just sleep there and leave. I get overflow from Lava Hot Springs. So yeah, it's actually been really fun. So I'm working.
Was it a good price in the house?
Oh yeah.
I was gonna say, that's it.
Yeah, a lot better than down here. Like I could buy 2 up there for the price of 1 down here. So I'm actually working on getting another one up there.
Yeah. So how'd you find that property?
They're the first townhomes that have ever been built in Malad.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, there's not a lot.
So it was a new build?
Yeah, so it's brand new.
Nice.
Yeah, there's actually not a lot of houses for sale up there, which is why I've been watching it to try to get another one. And I'm like, there's nothing to buy. And the town actually just passed an ordinance that you have to have 40 acres of land in order to build a house.
Oh, wow.
They like do not want growth there at all. They're like doing everything possible to resist growth.
Jeez. So other townhouses, are they rented out Airbnbs as well? Or are they people?
No, there's only 2 or 3 other Airbnbs in all of the town, and mine I think is the only one that has 3 bedrooms, so I do kind of get a lot of families and stuff so there.
Cream of the crop up there.
Yeah.
How long have you owned it?
It started last April, so I'm a little over a year in.
Okay, cool. And it's been positive, like cash flow?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, every month it's been positive, so.
Nice.
Yeah, it's been good.
How far out do people book?
That's actually the stressful thing with Airbnbs. They don't book out very far. I mean, I think if you were in like a vacation destination, like if you're in, I have some friends that have them in Sedona. I think those you're planning out a little bit more. Whereas these ones, like I have bookings into September and October, but it like fills up pretty last minute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would figure.
Yeah. So you kind of have to just like when I first opened, because it was the first time I felt like I kind of took like an entrepreneurial risk. Because I kind of needed the safety of like the regular paycheck and the corporate job and stuff. And now I'm starting to like take some entrepreneurial risks. But like starting an Airbnb in a town like that, it was kind of crazy to see what friends really supported me and see which ones were really negative. And they'd be like, who in their right mind is going to stay there? And I'm like, guys, I know it though, because it's where I grew up. It's kind of like if you're selling real estate, you should sell real estate where you really, really know. Yeah. And for me, I was like, there's no other place to stay. There's a need because there's always something random going on there. And so I was like, I just feel in my bones like this is right. But it's easy to doubt yourself when you have people that you care about being really negative about something that you're doing. And so that was a big lesson to me as to like, there's a core set of people that you should trust and you should listen to, and the rest of them, it's just like, whatever, because you're just not brave enough to take these kind of risks. Yeah. So you have the right to have your opinion, but also like, don't yuck someone's yum. You know, I love that phrase where it's just like, yeah, I like that.
So who cleans it for you up there?
My little cousins.
Okay, badass. That's badass. Yeah. How old are they?
They're like, one just turned 18, one's 13. My grandma will go in and do it. Like, it's just kind of a family affair. Yeah.
No, that's way cool. Because I was going to say that's probably the only problem up there, right? If you don't have someone to clean it.
Yeah. And I actually had a couple girls reach out and say, you know, they'd be interested in helping me. But my family's like, no, I think we're good. So.
Yeah, that's dope. So tell me about your corporate job a little bit, or tell our audience about your corporate job.
Yeah. So I oversee risk management for one of the large healthcare systems in the Valley, which essentially means when something goes wrong in the hospital, my team is who investigates it. Mm-hmm. And we try to determine if we broke standard of care or there was a breakdown in our process that led to a patient being harmed, or was this kind of their natural course of illness. Yeah. And then if we did have breakdowns, we did have opportunities to improve care, then we're responsible with putting the action plans in place to fix it so it doesn't happen to somebody else. And we got to make sure it doesn't just get fixed at one hospital. It's got to get fixed at all of our hospitals, because you don't want to just like learn in silos. And then we'll work with patients transparently and like proactively to try to settle with them, or to try to make them as whole as possible, knowing that you're never going to be whole if you lost a family member to medical error, or, you've got a permanent impairment because of something. But try to do the right thing for them without them having to go through the whole litigation and legal process, because you're probably going to end up with about the same amount, but then your attorney's going to take 40% of it and you're going to drag it out for 3 years.
Yeah.
Do
you like it?
I do like it. It's like dark some days. You're dealing with people that have had the worst day of their life, every single day. That's what you're dealing with. And so it was a fine balance for me to figure out how to cope with that emotion, because, I kind of been through all the stages of coping where it was like, I would want to numb it, or I would just cry all the time, or I would think the world was just this horrible place, or, I would ignore it for 3 months. And then the smallest, tiniest thing would be like what brought 3 months worth of cases out at the same time. And I would be like out of control, so I feel like over the years, I've been able to figure out what my coping skills are and when I feel it coming on. But also knowing that like sitting in the darkness with people is what people need. Yeah. And so if you're able to handle that emotionally, then you can do a lot of good. Like I also sit on some really sad committees. Like we have a committee where we review the suicides for the state of Utah, and we figure out commonalities and extra screening protocols and figuring out like what we can try to do to get ahead of the problem. And when they're coming in and having touch points with us, how do we prevent that outcome? Also, I sit on the state domestic violence fatality review. So every time a person is killed by their partner, we review that. And we're looking at different opportunities that we had where we could have screened them differently, or we could have had like resource conversations with them. And so when you're seeing those things day in and day out, it's hard to not think that that's happening all the time.
I was gonna say, how do you cope with all that? Because that is heavy stuff.
Yeah. And that's where I've had to figure out how to stay really grounded. And that looks different for everybody. I have to be outside a lot. So I actually really struggle in the winter, and I'm still trying to figure out how to navigate that in Utah, because I think there's something so powerful about being barefoot outside and like connecting with the earth. And there's actually scientific studies that show like inflammation in your body. And then when you're ground for a certain period of time, it's like all your colors turn from like oranges and reds to like blues and greens. Like it really is good for you to do that. Meditation, like yoga, and just also being able to say, hey, I'm not okay today. And I have an amazing boss, an amazing medical director that have like really empowered us to have like a human-centered event approach, where in the past with medical stuff, it was kind of just this like rough and tough culture where it's just like, well, this is just the job. Like, this is just the name of the game. Like, you're fine. You're going to come back tomorrow and you're going to do it all over again. And now we kind of have a more human-centered approach where we say, this must have been devastating for you. How are you? And do you need to go home for the rest of the week? And we provide paid time off for those people so that they're able to come back and not hurt the next person, because you're going to have a flashback to the code that you had the day before. And that's even trickled down to our team, where there are times that someone is working a devastating case and they need just like a day to be able to, like, I don't know, go read or go be outside with their kids or go do something. And so giving them that freedom to be able to take care of themselves and that permission, and that it's okay to have these feelings and it's okay to cry together. It's not a bad thing. It's not a weak thing. And that's been something that's been hard for me, is for years I felt like I didn't want to be, because I was also really young too. I started with them when I was 22. So I just hit 10 years. And so I was the young kid that would kind of come walking in and people would be like, oh, you're the person that's going to come deal with this situation? Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
How old are you? And so I didn't want to show that emotion because I didn't want to seem weak. And it's like, over the years, I figured out that, like, being able to sit with people in emotion and express that yourself is actually what helps people feel safe and be transparent and be supported.
Yeah. Do you think that your friends and your community helps keep you grounded, or is it more you got to kind of go inward?
I think that it's really difficult for any of my friends to even understand some of the stuff that I deal with at work on a day-to-day basis. So there's been times where it's like, the biggest thing that's happening in your world at the time is the biggest thing happening in your world. So I don't want to dismiss anybody's concerns, but something that's going on in their world that's devastating to them sometimes has been frustrating to me, because I'm just like, yeah, and I just sat across the table from a man who lost his wife in childbirth and has 3 kids at home now. Like, so sometimes the perspective has been difficult for me to figure out. And it also would make me dismiss my own things that were going on in my life, because I'd be like, well, you just should be grateful that you're healthy and your family's healthy and stuff. But you do also have to give yourself a little bit of the benefit of the doubt and be like, well, I also, like, feelings are valid, you know? It's like, it's okay to be upset, or it's okay to be sad about something that's much smaller than what I see that's devastating on a day-to-day basis. And I'm sure it's something that, you know, your trauma surgeons and your ER physicians and, like, your OBs and everybody, they have to figure out what that balance is too.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, our mutual friend, Nick,
yeah,
right? Like, I get a lot of insight from him, and, you know, I've got a couple other friends who are doctors, and it's like, man, there's some hard things that happen in healthcare.
Yeah.
Well, people die, right? And they're gone, and it's done, and it's over, and it's finished, and it's, you know, then, you know, some of these surgeons are people that were helping them along the way, like ER doctors, right? I mean, that's got to be the suckiest job ever.
I mean, think of being an ER physician at Primary Children's.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
It'd be hard.
Little kids coming in from car crashes, accidents, abuse.
Yeah.
Like, you're seeing some really, really hard things day in and day out. And so you have to figure out how to stay grounded yourself and how to take care of yourself, because it's easy to just get burned out. And that's a huge, like, epidemic. And is it epidemic or pandemic? I think it's epidemic. I don't know. Anyways, whatever word that's supposed to be. I think that's one of the biggest threats to healthcare right now, is the burnout, because of the emotional things that you see day in and day out. And the feeling of, like, there's so many things that we need to do to fix the world, and it gets almost overwhelming. And so that's something I've had to figure out, is, like, do what you can. And even the little bit of difference you're making will make a difference, even though it feels so overwhelming and that it's, like, not even possible to comprehend how we make things better.
Yeah.
But then I travel and I see things that I'm just like, oh gosh, we have it so good here. We have it so good, and we have it so much more figured out. There's so many things we need to get better with. And I think that we should always be, like, striving to improve and to just, like, move the needle a little bit farther, but also recognizing that, like, we do live in, like, the best possible place.
Yeah. How have you seen the healthcare industry pivot to be more human-centered on, like, on the physician side? Like, do they get more days off? Do they have more support systems? Is there anything like that going on?
I don't think their time off has gotten any better. If anything, they're expected to see more and more patients all the time. That's the insurance companies that are calling that. And so that's what's difficult. But I do think that, like, a lot of organizations, like, we have an EAP, so an employee assistance program that you can go to get counseling for free. And it took me years and years before I used it. And then it was like everything came out at once. So I do think that a lot more people are utilizing that resource. And there's peer support programs too. So if we have an event that's been devastating, then we can utilize the peer support program. So you'll have like someone who's your peer, like an emergency department can reach out to an emergency department physician, versus me in risk management being like, hey, I'm here to support you. But it's like, I'll never understand their perspective of things, you know? Yeah. So it is nice having that like physician to physician or nurse to nurse or tech to tech. Yeah, so I do think that that's gotten a lot better.
Oh, good. Do you see yourself being in this career for a long time?
It's hard because I feel like I'm good at it, very good at it. And I have made a huge difference. And now it's been exciting being part of these more community outreach programs. And I have to owe that to like my physician, my medical director, and my director for giving me the permission to go do those things too. Recognizing that now we can spend more time upstream too versus only in the reactionary. Like, okay, now the devastating event has happened and so we're going to try to fix it, trying to get upstream of it too. But I think that I don't see how I could juggle it and raise children at the same time. And I think that that's kind of the next like transition in my life is probably for the first time in my life. I think I'm finally ready to like get married and settle down. Yeah. So I would like to kind of continue on like some of my more entrepreneurial stuff, like my properties and like my YouTube videos and things like that, and tap into that. It's more creative. It's more just like bucket filling for me. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. I guess we'll see. Yeah. We'll play that by ear and see how that goes.
Yeah. Yeah. For fun.
Yeah.
So tell me, you've traveled to over 50 countries.
Yes.
Right? We were talking about that earlier. What's your favorite one?
Oh, it's always hard when people ask me that question because there's like so many things about the different countries that I love, but South Africa had actually been my dream trip for a really long time. I don't know why. That just was like, I wanted to go on a safari so bad from the time I was a little kid, like seeing giraffes and elephants and lions and everything. So I actually got to do that trip last fall, and I was the only girl with 8 of my guy friends. Bless their hearts for taking me with them. So it was entertaining, but we got to do Cape Town. We got to do Kruger National Park, which you self-drive through there, which was awesome. Like we got to like experience these elephants playing in this like water together, and you're not supposed to get out of your car, but we were out of the car. And then like when we were driving out 100 feet later, there was a den of lions that were all, I was like, this is why you're not supposed to get out of your car. Right. But they're usually pretty chill in the day. And so it was just like this feeling that I feel like I haven't had since I was a little kid, where every single day I woke up and I felt like a child again, because that like childhood wonder of seeing something for the first time in person, I totally tapped into that, where I was just stoked. Like you'd think by the time you saw 80 elephants in a day, you'd be like, it's just an elephant. No, it's just as stoked by the last one as I was for the first one. But then we actually went up to Zambia and Zimbabwe in order to do the Zambezi River. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
I haven't, no.
It is one of the craziest rivers in the world. And it was actually the part of the trip that I was a little skeptical about, because we slept on the side of the river. So we did a 2-day river trip. So we had to pack our sleeping bags with us there and everything. And on rapid 5, we flipped and I got stuck under the raft for like a pretty considerable amount of time. And like my whole life pretty much flashed before my eyes. And I had so many thoughts going through my head where I was just like, just relax. And like your life jacket will pull you out, because like it had flipped me upside down. So I was completely disoriented in the water. And it's like, it's pretty intense. Like you're going over, that was a class 5 rapid. So it's as big as it gets that you should go over. And I remember the guide had to actually come under and pull me out. And I like come up to the surface and I look over to my right, and Mike Green is there. I don't know if you know him. He's a big burly dude, kind of like yourself. And he has this look of like death in his eyes. And I remember in that moment thinking like, we've messed up. Like we've pushed the limits too far and I should not be here. Yeah. And so we laughed because there was like 2 rapids later. I was like yelling at Mike to paddle. I was like, we're going to die if you don't paddle. And anyways, we never flipped the rest of the trip, but you also have to be careful not to flip because there's crocodiles in the water. Oh. And it's like insane. Like you could not do, and they're actually damming that river up for a power source in 2025. So that's why the boys wanted to go do this so bad, because you're not going to be able to do it anymore.
Is this like Victoria Falls or Angels Falls?
Yeah, so Victoria Falls is it Victoria Falls? It's I think it's Victoria Falls.
Yeah.
Whatever. Yeah, it's whatever those big, huge falls are. So we did that whole, like, the Devil's Pool where you go out and you're, like, on the very edge of the waterfall.
So there's a high probability I'll be there next year.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think because Jimmy's done that trip.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's one of the coolest places. So you have these guides that are keeping you alive the whole time. And then we slept on the side of the river. And so they have porters that, like, brought the tents and stuff down to us. But I just was, like, giggling to myself. I was like, I am as remote in the world as I possibly could be right now. Like, I am so many kilometers into the middle of nowhere in between Zambia and Zimbabwe, sleeping in a tent with, like, we each had our own little tent, and it was so funny. Mike Green was on the outside, and he's, like, fighting monkeys off all night long in his tent. But the porters were so awesome, and the guides were so awesome. Like, I was so appreciative for them, and you're, like, bonding with them. And I remember asking them that night, like, how many people do the second half of the river? Because most people just do, like, the first 14 rapids, and we were doing 44. And so I was like, how many people do the second day? And they're like, I think the last time we did it was about 9 months ago. And I was like, oh my gosh, how do you know what the water is going to be like? Because the water levels are constantly changing. They're like, we'll just, like, scope it out before we go over them. And so just the anxiety I had the whole time, but also just, like, completely, like, releasing myself to that experience and being like, the fact I get to experience this in this life is so cool. Like, who else sleeps on the side of the Zambezi River with 8 of their guy friends and a whole bunch of guides, you know, like, it was just such a spiritual experience almost. And then we survived the second day, and there's periods of time where that section of the river is a lot more flat, so you can't actually put anything in the water. So, like, the kayakers that spot the rapids will get into the kayaks with you, because otherwise crocodiles will attack them.
Oh, really?
It's intense.
Jeez.
And so they say you can't even, like, put your hand in the water, and it's, like, really hot. So they're like, if you need water, like, you need to get your helmet in really quick and do that. And you'd see them, like, sitting off to the sides. Like, it's wild. So you survive, and then I had to giggle because then you have to hike straight out of this canyon. And so they have these, like, janky sticks that are, like, tied together with wire. And so we had 2 bigger guys with us, and they're just, like, snapping the sticks. Like, and I was like, we're going to die on the hike out. Like, we survived the river. We're going to die on the hike out. And I was just, like, laughing the whole time because I'm like, this is hilarious. And it's 120 degrees, and you're packing your paddle and your helmet and your life jacket out. And you get up to the top, and they had to drive us back into, like, where we were staying in Zambia. But now you're, like, a long ways away. And so they had us in one of those open safari trucks, and we drove through all of the villages where these guys that had just kept me alive for 2 days on the river grew up. And we were drinking water, you know, everybody's dehydrated and stuff. And the guides, like, grab our empty water bottles and throw it out to the little kids that were, like, running alongside of, and you're, like, in the bush in Africa, like, they're sleeping in, like, dirt huts and stuff. And the little kids were so excited. And I remember just being like, are they just stoked because there's a truck going through? And they're like, no, that's the only way they can carry water to school is if they have, like, an empty water bottle, and they walk about 3 hours round trip to school. Jeez. And I bawled the entire drive out. It was like an hour and a half drive where I had my sunglasses on, and just tears were just nonstop coming down, and all of us were just dead silent. And I had this whole realization where I just kept saying, we have so much. We have so much, and it's never enough here. And those little kids are so excited for an empty water bottle. And it was that true, like, I kind of hate the cliche when people go and do, like, a quote unquote humanitarian trip, and they, like, go do something nice for a day, and then they take a bunch of pictures with, like, kids. And like, I never have wanted to be that person. But it was just this whole experience where there's so many times this year that I have this moment where I'm complaining about something, or I just, like, am wishing I had something that's, you know, a nicer this or a nicer this. And I have just this, like, back to reality moment where it's like, you have so much, Dani, and you have so much to be grateful for. And there's, like, so much good that you need to put out into the world. And so it's something that I'm really trying to figure out is, like, how do I help more when I go on these, like, trips to these other countries, and just also spread that too. Like, I know it's really hard it's easy to hear somebody's story and be like, yeah. But like seeing that in person and having this realization that these men just kept me alive for a full like 48 hours. And this is where they grew up and how different we are, but how much we actually have in common. Yeah. It was just, it was life-changing.
So did you guys only flip one time?
We flipped. The other raft did flip a different time.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, we did everything possible to not flip after that. Like, we were terrified.
That's crazy.
And I think if you even talk to Jimmy, he's like, it's one of the craziest things I've ever done in my life.
Yeah, I literally just talked to him like days ago about this because I was asking him where like his favorite places to go, and it's like that's his favorite place he's ever been. It's
life-changing. I don't know. And the people there, I know people always say that when they travel. Oh, the people are so great. No, like genuinely, they were so great. And they like came and had dinner with us the next night. We were like all buying these like hand-carved statues from them. Like the guys were so cute. They like pretty much gave them all their stuff. They're like, here's my shoes, here's my hats, here's this, you know, and like we all gave them like a huge tip and stuff at the end of it because I just was like, here's all my money, have everything. Yeah. Like I don't need it and you do. And I don't know. I just think that sometimes I wouldn't have had some of those realizations had I not gone and traveled and prioritized experiences over things. And so sometimes when I see people, like certain friends of mine and different people that they're like obsessed with like name brand stuff, it just makes me sad for them a little bit because I just think it's not necessary and it doesn't make you happy. But like figuring out how to serve and like give back to people, that will make you happy. And like, you know, I don't know. It's just something I've been trying to tap into is be a little bit more minimalistic and I'm not perfect at it at all, but it's a work in art.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's funny going and visiting other countries and seeing how the people live and just how different it is. Like we were just in Spain, right? We rented the Bulls.
I love Spain so much.
But we would stop at these gas stations, right? And like, you know, we're 70 of us, right? So we go in these gas stations and we're like cleaning them out.
Yeah. Right? I bet they're probably like, what is this that just rolled in?
Plus we're just like abundant, right? So we're just
like, and Americans are loud. Like you don't realize how loud Americans are until you go to other countries and then you're like sitting around like being with those 8 guys in Africa. There'd be times I'd be like, guys,
calm.
Stop talking about how many like 5-year-olds you could take on at the same time. People are horrified around us. Like, and I bet you guys turn into like little kids a little bit when you're around each other because when you get a whole bunch of dudes around each other, because I've traveled with them quite a bit, I feel like they're totally themselves. And I'm sitting there like, I would kill for another girl to be with me right now.
Oh no, you would be out of place with this group. It's just like, no, we went into one place and I actually thought, I'm like, dude, we might actually buy every single thing in this damn store. I mean, because we're just grabbing water. It's harder than hell.
Yeah.
Right? So grabbing water, we're grabbing all the alcohol that they have, right? Which is like, I don't know, 10 cases.
Yeah.
Because there's like tons of us. And dude, we're checking out and I'm paying like 12 euros for like 2 bags worth of stuff. And I'm like, this is interesting. I remember getting on the bus after we were done there with cookies and snacks and just all this stuff. Right? And I'm like, dude, the inflation hasn't hit over here like it's in America, man. Like this would have cost like 100 and 120 bucks.
Easy. Yeah.
You know, it was like a tenth of the price.
Yeah.
And, I mean, a couple of times we hit the 20 euros area, you know, and then it actually was so cheap that most guys were like, because it was like 1 million transactions, right? So like guys would be, hey, you two come over here and we would just buy,
just cover them together.
So to stop the transactions being over and over and over. And I almost I was looking at the people's faces. I look at faces a lot and kind of see how people react because, you know, your face says a lot, right? And I could see like them being overwhelmed. See, in America, it's like, hell yeah, buy it all, capitalism. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I'll just get more, you know? And I'm almost like, I wonder if they run out of this. Like, because we're in some remote areas. And I'm like, I wonder if they run out of this, they don't get supplied for like a week.
Yeah, it's possible.
And the look on their face is like, oh, geez.
Like a little panicky.
Yeah, I'm not going to be able to sell to my normal people, you know? But
these Americans came through and cleaned us out.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, gosh, you'd be dead. My gosh.
How was running of the Bulls, though? I went last year and it was like insane. Like trying to describe that culture experience to people. I tried to run the second day, actually. And I swore to my family I wasn't going to run because they were like, you're seriously going to go to Spain and run with a bull when you've like grown up with bulls and had to run from them? Yeah. And so the first day I actually fought for a spot on the fence at Dead Man's Corner. So I got to watch.
Oh, okay.
And then the second day I was like, okay, like I feel good about it. I'm going to run. And I wasn't going to let the bulls get like right up next to me, but I kind of wanted the experience. I wanted to get into the arena and stuff. And we lined up actually at the same exact spot that they had the day before. And they kicked us out because there was 1,000 more people trying to run that day. Cause we didn't put 2 and 2 together that it was Saturday morning.
Yeah.
And so then all the locals are off work and stuff. So anyways, we got kicked out. but I truly believe the universe was looking out for the 3 of us that got kicked out. And so I booked it to the stadium, scalped a ticket, and then couldn't get in the stadium because it was so packed. Yeah. And then it clicked that I was like, wait, they have to run into the stadium and the outside corridors open. So I figured out where they were running into the stadium and got the coolest viewpoint ever, where they're all like cool. running down the tunnel. Yeah. And like that video that Jimmy posted before you guys went to Spain was the video I had taken, and I airdropped it to him. So
very cool.
Yeah.
No, it was amazing. I got licked by a bull and I got bumped in the back by the same bull.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm going to run, right? So I put a neon hat on, right?
Yeah, I saw that.
See myself, right? And I don't know what I was thinking, but you know the little green guys that gets behind him with the stick, right? And they kind of like corral him with the thing so they don't turn around and just start wrecking people.
Yeah.
I saw that guy and I was like, oh, hell yeah. So I just like got behind him, right? Dude, there was people everywhere jumping over everybody.
It's
like
craziness.
Chaos. And so I get behind that guy in the green. And my wife was there, right? So she was up on the balcony just watching me, just thinking I'm stupid, right? Because I literally... Four of them in front of me, and I got right in front of 8 bulls.
Oh, that's crazy.
And I'm just like running. I have this, I'll show you later. But as I'm running, I get licked. And I like look at my hand, and I'm like, what the freak? Because it's like my whole hand, right? And as I go to look, I get one of the steers hit me in the back, right? And I was like, what the flip? So I kind of moved over, and I'm like in a full sprint, right? Like we're going hard.
Yeah.
Then it just kind of like trots past me, and I was like, did that just happen? And then like... You know, at the end, we're all sharing war stories, right? Like one of us got knocked down, you know, our friend Brad, and got a little tore up, but not bad, right? Like battle scars, right? He's like, this is the most amazing thing ever. And I'm like, they're like, what happened with you? You know, I'm like, I got licked. And people are like, what? And I'm like, I feel like I need to see a video of this because I don't know if I'm making this up in my head, but like I feel like I got licked. But let's hold off until I see something. And sure enough, man, there's a whole video of them doing it. And
that's so funny. Yeah, my crazy. Group of friends didn't fare as well as your guys' did, but they were they didn't get hurt on the run, but once they get into the arena and, you know, they like put the big bulls away and they let the smaller ones out that have the capped horns, they were totally messing with those. And so one of them had a skull fracture that they were dealing with the rest of the time that we were traveling. Like they were all like, when I met them out of the arena, every single one of them had blood on them. And some of them, it wasn't their blood, it was someone else's. But I was like, someone's pants were completely ripped off. Like, I was like, you guys are dumb, but I don't know. It's
when that bull came out, that little, I call it a teenage bull, right? Yeah. It wasn't a baby bull, it was a freaking teenage
They're
bull.
quick though.
Oh, dude. It comes out, it's like, and I was like.
And it'll like lock on somebody, and that's who it wants.
Oh, dude, it hit like 8 dudes before I was like, okay, time to move.
Yeah.
Right? I ended up jumping over the fence because they push you back in, right? All the police are like pushing you back in. I just ran and jumped over this fence because there was a couple of WOT guys behind there, and I just yelled out, "Catch me!" It's like, get me out of here.
They're like, oh my gosh.
They're like, yeah. But I mean, honestly, it was amazing. Like, absolutely amazing.
Yeah, Spain is a cool place, and like you get to experience those cultural like. There's so many different things that like festivals I want to go to around the world just because it's their culture and it's
Are you
cool.
into music festivals?
I'm not the biggest music festival person, and it's because huge crowds kind of stress me out a little bit. Yeah. Which is why, like, you know how packed it is at night at the Bulls? Like, I have to mind over matter those things. But, you know, I've been to a music festival or two, but I think that people's, like, big, huge crowds of energy, like, kind of rub off onto me. And it's something I'm trying to, like, figure out, like, how do you navigate, like, and kind of put, like, a protection up to protect you from, like, tons of energy.
Yeah. See, and I love the energy.
Yeah.
That's my thing. I just love just like taking it in. And I'm different than people though. I'm massive, right? So I'm never worried. I'm never like, in fact, I never really, you know, when you get massive crowds, like especially your size, right? Like you can have a hard time breathing. Right?
Yeah.
Well, it never happens to me because I'm normally a full head taller than everybody, right? So I'm just like, just soaking it in, you know, and just kind of loving it.
It's something I've had to explain to Mike Green, my friend that I was talking about, because he was at Running of the Bulls with me too. And when they started to push us out of Running of the Bulls that second day, the cops line up in a line and they have like the shields and they start pushing you out. Well, the guys that are at the front figure out they're getting pushed out. So they're trying to push back in order to get through. And I swear I was the only girl with like 250 dudes. And everyone's speaking different languages and everyone's pushing in like opposing directions. And so Mike had to go behind me and my friend Chris Huntsman went in front of me and they like locked arms with each other to like shield me because I was getting like trampled and smashed.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so that's when I was like, okay, I need to be more careful and to like stop like risking so much because I'm like,
I'll tell you a funny story. So, yeah, they push you to the sides, right, to make that little alley, right? So the government can walk through and approve the route or whatever the hell they're doing, right?
I do think they kick people out. Then, like, if you have a camera strapped to the front of you or something, they'll kick you out.
Oh,
and,
they're
like,
doing that? Yeah.
Yeah, they do, like, kick people out. So I think they're monitoring to make sure someone's not, like, trying to record on their phone and then causing, like, a whole bunch of injuries.
Oh, right. That makes sense.
Yeah.
But the cops were pushing us back, right? They kind of pushed me a little bit.
Yeah.
And I was like, I go watch this. I'm not going to move. And I just kind of stood there and I was like looking up at this guy, and this dude is pushing me as hard as he possibly can. And I just started laughing. I was trying to hold on and not laugh.
Yeah.
And he like looks at me, he's all pissy, right? I just smile and he goes, he kind of like, please, dude. So I just take a step back.
He's like, I don't know what to do with this.
Yeah, I actually can't move him. This is odd. But yeah, it was a blast, man. I'm with you. I love traveling. So did you see Gaudi's Basilica?
Yeah.
Oh, dude.
Yeah.
That was my favorite part.
Oh, and I love how the colored glass, there's like a sunset side and a sunrise side. And so it's all like, that is crazy.
There's so much more stained glass in there. Did you notice that?
Yeah.
All that white stuff, right? Like when they're done with that thing, I told my wife, I'm like, I went there with her before, right? And we're like, dude, as soon as this is done, we're bringing the kids.
Oh, yeah.
It's about 4 years out, it seems.
It's so cool. And I think that's something that bums me out a little bit when I travel is you go to these places and these buildings. They take such care and such pride in taking care of what was already there. And I feel like in America, we just like rip it down and start over.
We do.
And so I know that we're a very new nation, and so we're never going to have the culture quite like they do. But what culture we have had, people are just like, nah, just like get rid of it and build something new. Yeah. And so it is something that the United States is lacking. Yeah.
We also need to build something cool like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I know they started in the 1800s, but
I know you go to the Vatican and you're like, that was like one of my first stints with religion where I was like, this is crazy. Like, this has existed longer than our religion has even been on this planet, and just how you feel the spirit there. And you just are like, oh, there's so many ways to tap into spirituality.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. So let me ask you a couple more questions here. We're almost getting to the end.
All right.
What's the most important thing to you?
What's the most important? That's a deep question. I think the most important thing to me is experiencing life to its fullest so that then I can help other people. And maybe let me phrase this a little bit. Like there's that whole saying that hell would be if you get to the other side and you see the version of yourself that you could have been. I think that I have wanted to say yes to every opportunity in this life, and I wanted to experience everything in this life, and I want to be grateful for every single day I get to spend here. And I get to just like become a more authentic and better version of myself. Like every day that goes by, I feel like I tap more and more and more into that. And by doing that, I hope to like, I don't know whether it's you even just motivate one person or you help one person like tap into that and see like how special this is that we get to be here and we get to have this human experience.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. So what's the thing in the future you're looking the most forward to?
Probably getting married and having kids. Yeah. And that hasn't always like, there were periods of time in my life where I'm like, I don't know if I'm meant to like be married. Like I'm kind of a free spirit and I don't know if I do really well being like, having someone tell me what I can and can't do. Yeah. And I don't know if I'd be a good mom. And like the more I've like tapped into who I really am, I'm just like, oh no, I'm going to be such a good mom. But it was a good thing I wasn't a mom when I was 20.
Right.
Like I'm in such a better place. And also like a lot of my beliefs around marriage were that it meant a loss of freedom and that it meant someone was controlling you and that it wasn't happiness. And so I've like fought against that for forever. Yeah. And so the last few years it's been not only transitioning my beliefs around that, but like surrounding myself with people like you and Michelle, where I'm just like, I would be so lucky to have a marriage like you guys do. There's no control there. There's teamwork. Like you guys are a team unit and you are like, her happiness is your happiness and vice versa. And like, you're in this together. And I have other friends like Travis and Jenny Prince. Like I adore them. And so having people around that just have these like beautiful, strong marriages makes me see like I can take my life to a whole next level and get to experience like all of the beauty of that too. It's just, I have to have the right person, you know?
No, absolutely. I'm happy you said that, actually. It's a major compliment. But it's right. I don't ever feel like I need to get permission or, you know, in my marriage, at least, you know, like we understand each other so well. Yeah. You know, that we really, I've been given some advice recently. I don't know why people take my advice, but I give it a lot, right? It's worth what they paid for it. And I think people get this idea of marriage where like, oh, we become one and everything we do is together. And like, this just... They're
my other half. Yeah, they're like, you know, and you're like, no, you should be whole the whole time. Oh, like, you know.
Well, my advice is, right, I'm like, no, guys, no. Like, dude, you wake up every day and you look over the person you picked and you said, hey, we doing this again? And they're like, yeah, I'll pick you again. Like, okay, good. Then you go out and fight the world all day. And then you come home and you gotta love on each other, whatever you need to get that energy back in your life, and you go back to bed and rinse and repeat that shit every day. Like, you need to be two strong individuals that love themselves, like real self-love, and then choose each other every day. Not once a year, not renew your vows every 20 years, like literally every day. And that's really how I explain marriage to people. You know, it's like, it really is, it's a partnership. And if you're not best friends, you know, and yeah, it's hard, don't get me wrong, there's ups and downs and there's times where you're like, ugh, you know, but like really, they're really few and far between.
Well, it's with anything in life, there's like a balance. You'd never have good days if you didn't have bad days. Yeah. So it's like, you can't have the highs without the lows. And so like learning to appreciate the lows and learning to appreciate the struggle and the journey actually makes like the end outcome that much better. And I also just think like truly tapping in and understanding the masculine and the feminine and the yin and the yang of that has like completely changed my perspective, because it was just like, I had to function in my masculine for so long, just out of survival and in my career and owning houses, like you kind of have to. But then like figuring out that tapping into my feminine energy is actually where my true power is. But then I have to have a partner that is tapped into his masculine so that I can be safe in my feminine. 100%. And like, it is a total yin and yang. And I mean, even like, as I like tap more into my feminine, there's times where I've actually had internal conversations with myself where I go, okay, you're too in your feminine right now and your masculine needs to come out to protect you. Yeah. And like, there is like the whole balance of it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. No, you're right. I mean, that's another thing that, you know, I've known this for a long time. I don't know why, but like, it's really manifested recently where it's like, guys, if you show up super masculine in your relationships, it allows your wife or your partner to be overly feminine, which is fun. That's the fun. That's the chaos.
That's freeing. It's like creative. It's flowy. It's like, whereas if they don't feel safe or they feel like they're alone in it, then they have to operate in their masculine. And then it just like causes issues. Turn into order. Like women do want a manly man to like come in and be like, this is what, you know, like they want them to lead and to feel safe with that, but not from a place of control either.
Right. Yeah, control's an interesting thing to me. I've never, when you said that recently, I was like, I wonder if I've ever been controlling. You know what I mean? Or maybe my wife likes it controlling. I don't know, you know? But it's like, but I don't think so. I don't think it's a controlling thing. I think it's an understanding between two people, right? That you're just like, what are we doing with this?
Well, there's a lot of trust with you guys too. Yeah. Like you have friendships and relationships with the other sex because you guys are so committed and so trustful with each other that it's like, it's normal for you and I to text and Michelle to never be like, why are you talking to her? You know, or vice versa. Like if she was to be texting Nick, you'd never think about it. Yeah. Because you have that trust. Whereas like a lot of people can't say that. And then it turns into control. And
I realize that,
So.
Yeah. And it comes down to respect too, right? I mean, that's why you stay with friendships. That's why you stay with people you love, you know, is because you respect each other. Yeah. I think that's where things break down, is when people stop respecting. That's when, you know, things blow up.
Yeah.
So, well, hey, we're at the end and you've got an appointment.
I do.
So, but I want your best 2 minutes of advice.
My best 2 minutes of advice. I think the biggest lesson I learned this year, you know, I've had a lot of awesome experiences and I've gotten to live a lot of life in, you know, I just turned 33. So I feel like I'm probably like about a third of the way through my life, you know? So I was kind of reflecting on that the other day. I'm like, you live to be 100. I'm a third of the way through. So let's like look back at it. What do I want my next third to be like? Yeah. And that's when I want to transition to this whole like marriage and family and all of that. And I think my biggest lesson though is like not ever miss out on the life you're living right now waiting for the next stage of your life. So I feel like a lot of people do that. They can't wait until they graduate college. And then they graduate college and they're into the job and they're like, oh, I wish that I would have enjoyed like being a poor college student more. Or like right now I'm trying to just like fully embrace this period where it's like, I know my partner's coming soon because I've put in the work and I am like ready for it. But like, I'm also just trying to genuinely be like, I am so appreciative for this last little bit where I get to be alone and I get to do whatever I want in the morning and I get to be with my dog and I get to read and I get to do yoga and like all that stuff, knowing that pretty soon I'm going to have a house full of little kids and I'm going to be like, oh, I wish that I could just like go back to those days where I could do whatever I wanted. And so I'm truly just trying to like be so grateful for whatever stage in life I'm in, knowing that it is going to change and that's like the evolution. But I don't want to miss out on the fact that like you're in the thick of life right now. Like this is the moment that you've been waiting your whole life to live. So like savor it, appreciate it, take the time to like not be distracted on my phone, to like really look around and like appreciate the trees and the birds. And like the other day I always eat while I'm like playing on my phone and I put my phone down and I was just like thinking of the food I was eating and I was like, this tastes so good. But you're always distracted by something these days. And so it's like, I think it's just trying to be minimalistic, be appreciative, live in the moment, and just know that like, stop waiting for life to happen. This is the life that you're living.
Perfect. Oh, I love that. Well, hey man, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
This is awesome, dude. I'm excited to share it with the world.
Well, I appreciate you, and I love listening to your episodes and just all of your advice and your wisdom. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the President McCormack Podcast, brought to you by McCormack Foundation, Saxton Fund, ADP Lemco, and Professional Floor Systems. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast and keep up with Mark on Instagram @President McCormack.